In the space between darkness and dawn, the future takes root. Here, in one of Earth's last great rainforests, we begin to understand what healing looks like. Not as we imagined it, not in straight lines and careful plans, but in the chaotic perfection of nature's own design. Life builds in layers here. Each level tells a different story of survival, of adaptation, of renewal. From the highest emergent trees piercing the clouds to the darkness of the forest floor, every niche has been filled through millions of years of evolution. This is nature's architecture at its most complex, and its most vulnerable. Part 1. Reading Nature's Blueprint. The first step in rebuilding is learning to read. Not words on a page, but the subtle languages of ecosystems. Every tree's growth pattern holds centuries of climate data. Every animal's movement tells us about habitat needs. Every interaction between species reveals the invisible architecture that holds these systems together. Watch how laser scanning reveals the forest's hidden structure. Each tree creates its own microclimate, its branches and leaves precisely arranged to capture light while sheltering other species. This isn't random growth, it's natural engineering perfected over millennia. Below ground, another blueprint unfolds. Roots don't just anchor trees, they form living networks that share resources and information. Fungi thread through the soil like neural networks, connecting different species in webs of mutual aid. This is the true foundation of forest architecture, not what we see, but what we're only beginning to understand. Part 2. The Seeds of Change. Modern restoration begins in the air. Watch how these drones navigate the complex topology of degraded land, their payloads carefully engineered for maximum survival. Each seed is a data point in a vast experiment, its genetics analyzed, its coding designed to resist drought, its position logged with sub-meter precision. But technology can only begin the process. As these seeds sprout, they face the same challenges their ancestors did. Drought, predation, competition. We can help them survive, but we cannot, and should not, control every variable. Nature's architecture emerges from chaos as much as order. Across the tropics, thousands of such experiments unfold. Some fail. Others succeed in unexpected ways. Each teaches us something new about how ecosystems rebuild themselves. The most successful sites often deviate the most from our careful plans, nature writing its own revisions to our blueprints. Part 3. The Coral Chronicles, underwater sequence showing advanced reef restoration, in warm equatorial waters. Another kind of architecture takes shape. Coral reefs, the rainforests of the sea, face unprecedented challenges. But here too, innovation meets ancient wisdom. Close-up of coral propagation techniques. Watch how fragments of heat-resistant corals are carefully cultured. Each polyp carries genetic adaptations that might help it survive in warmer seas. This isn't genetic engineering, it's careful selection, accelerating natural processes that would take centuries. Wide shot of restored reef system. The results challenge our assumptions about recovery. These new reefs don't look exactly like the ones they replace. They're different, adapted to new conditions, built to survive in a changing world. Yet they still provide the essential architecture that thousands of species need to thrive. Part 4. Grassland Symphony. The architecture of grasslands writes itself in movement. Watch how herds flow across the landscape like living rivers, their paths shaped by invisible boundaries of scent and memory. Each species moves differently, grazers following the reins, browsers seeking specific trees, predators tracking them all. Thermal imaging reveals predator-prey dynamics. Night vision shows us what daylight conceals. Predators don't just chase prey, they shape entire ecosystems. Their presence changes how herds move, where they graze, how long they stay. This creates patterns of disturbance and recovery that grasslands need to thrive. Split screen showing vegetation changes over seasons. The savanna breathes with the seasons. Watch how grass is brown and green in waves across the landscape. Each cycle of growth and dormancy builds soil, stores carbon, feeds life. This is architecture in 4 dimensions, space and time dancing together. Close-up of soil restoration techniques. Beneath our feet, another restoration unfolds. Soil microbes, carefully cultured, rebuild fertility in degraded areas. Native grasses, their roots reaching deeper than tree trunks, weave carbon back into earth that erosion had stripped bare. This is how grasslands heal, from the ground up. Part 5. Forest Memories. In the great northern forests, restoration means remembering. These ecosystems grew after ice sheets retreated, their species pioneering new ground. Now they face changes just as dramatic, but much faster. Advanced mapping shows species migration patterns. Watch how plants and animals move upslope, seeking cooler conditions. Our role isn't to prevent this movement, but to facilitate it. Wildlife corridors become climate corridors. Protected areas shift with the species they shelter. Sometimes the best restoration comes with teeth and claws. See how beavers, return to their ancient territories, reshape entire valleys. Their dams slow water, create wetlands, support hundreds of other species. This is how nature engineers its own recovery. Time-lapse of forest regeneration after disturbance. Forests remember their patterns. After fire or storm, watch how species return in predictable sequences. Pioneers first, their fast growth stabilizing soil. Then shade-tolerant species, slowly building complexity. Each stage creates conditions for the next. Part 6. Coastal Innovations. Tidal wetland at dawn, showing integrated natural engineered systems. Where land meets sea, innovation takes new forms. Traditional seawalls give way to living shorelines. Salt marshes, mangroves, and oyster reefs become the new foundations of coastal resilience. Engineering meets ecology in surprising ways. See how artificial reefs, designed by algorithms but built by living organisms, break waves more effectively than concrete. Watch how marshlands absorb storm surge, their flexibility their greatest strength. Each structure serves multiple purposes. Fish find shelter in the same formations that protect shorelines. Oysters filter water while building natural seawalls. This is how coastal ecosystems should work. Every element supporting many others. Part 7. Mountain reconnections. Aerial sequence showing wildlife overpasses spanning highways. High in the mountain ranges, connectivity becomes crucial. Watch how carefully designed overpasses help species move between isolated habitats. These aren't just bridges, they're lifelines for genetic diversity. Thermal imaging shows nighttime wildlife movement. The success is written in footprints and fur. Bears, wolves, elk, species that once faced extinction in these ranges now move freely between protected areas. Each crossing strengthens populations, increases resilience, rebuilds ancient relationships. Mapping shows larger ecosystem connections. These connections ripple outward. River systems revive when migrating species return. Plant communities diversify when seed carriers can move freely. The architecture of conservation isn't about isolated preserves, it's about rebuilding nature's networks. Part 8. Urban integration. Even our densest cities learn new patterns. Green roofs become stepping stones for migrating birds. Rain gardens filter pollution while providing habitat. Every park, every planted strip becomes part of larger ecological networks. Thermal imaging reveals urban wildlife movement, night reveals secret highways through urban spaces. Foxes follow railway lines grown wild with native plants. Owls hunt from architecturally integrated perches. The boundary between human and wild spaces blurs, enriching both. Underground showing soil regeneration in urban areas. Below the streets, soil systems reconnect through carefully designed corridors. Native microbes return to urban earth. Fungal networks spread between parks and preserves. The city's foundations become living systems again. Part 9. Future architectures, advanced visualization showing climate adaptation strategies. Tomorrow's restoration projects must be dynamic, adaptive, prepared for change. Watch how protected areas shift with changing conditions. See how species movements are facilitated across continents. This is conservation that thinks in centuries. AI modeling shows ecosystem adaptation scenarios. Artificial intelligence helps us understand possible futures. Each scenario teaches us something new about resilience, about adaptation, about hope. We're learning to design not just for what is, but for what might be. Global view showing connected restoration projects. From space, you can see the new patterns emerging. Corridors connect across continents. Coastal projects link into oceanic networks. Urban green spaces become part of larger ecological systems. The architecture of hope. "10 years have passed since those first seeds fell. The forest that has grown isn't exactly what we planned, it's better. More diverse. More resilient. More alive." This is the true architecture of life. Not rigid designs, but flexible frameworks. Not control, but cooperation. Not separation, but integration. Every restored ecosystem teaches us something new about resilience. Every recovering species shows us something fresh about adaptation. Every successful project demonstrates that nature's capacity for renewal exceeds our expectations. As another day begins, new seeds take root. New connections form. New possibilities emerge. This is not just restoration, it's renaissance. Not just rebuilding what was lost, but creating something that has never existed before. A world where human ingenuity serves nature's wisdom. The architecture of life continues to evolve. And we are learning, at last, to be better builders.